And we'll let our guest speaker take things away.
Yeah,
That's it.
So, hi, I'm Romy Tittel. I live in the Springbank area. Just in the way of introduction, first of all, I'm an artist. Second of all, I'm the second female journeyman electrician in Alberta. I'm a CAD operator, electrical designer, business owner, software developer, database designer, and I'm now also your Green Party candidate for the Foothills Riding federally. That's where I'm at right now in life. But one of the reasons I'm here to talk to you guys is about bringing attention to how we interface in the life around us. And I developed this art project because of my life experience in interacting with the world around me. Another key factor is my husband is born outside of Baghdad. He's a Syrian, and lately in the news, ISIS has been destroying those archaeological ruins, and that's my husband's culture that is being destroyed. And he left Iraq because of Saddam Hussein. So I crossed from being born in Canada to having a husband in the Middle East. So this story begins at the first Gulf War. Time moves on, that was when I was 31. Time moves on to 2003, the second Gulf War happens. And it's been quite tumultuous because my husband's family is being bombed, and so it's not just something that's happening over there, it's happening in my world. But that aside, one fine day in March, so 13 years ago in March, my dog is dying of bone cancer, and I'm sitting in the vet's office finding out that he's got 1 day to live, and I'm reading the Sun newspaper. Well, things are being tested. So I open up the Sun newspaper, and on the inside page, 2/3 of the way down, there was a picture about this big of a Middle Eastern man holding a young daughter in his arms. I immediately recognized him as being from Iraq. That was clearly obvious. Then I read the description, and it says, a man in Iraq with his injured daughter. And I thought, well, I don't know, he really looked more upset than his daughter just being injured. So I went back to the picture, and you see his face, you see his daughter's face, her eyes are closed, and he's holding her like this, and you follow her body, and you realize on this side that her legs are actually blown off and she's dead. And that headline didn't even acknowledge that she was dead. So thus began the process in my mind as to how we take information, how we're given information, and whether we follow any of these stories from where they start to where they end. So after much thinking and considering, I thought, how can I represent this in an easy, digestible way, what I've seen every day in my life. So I started quite arbitrarily on August 21st, 2013. I decided I'm going to track the headlines that I'm exposed to from various sources, the CBC, MSNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera, quite international stories. I decided I would make this an international project, not a Canadian project. So what I did is I decided I'm going to make a headline calendar. So what you're looking at here is 1 year of your life. That was when you guys were 16, right? 16 to 17. So what happens with this headline calendar is I give a calendar, so you've got 12 months of the year, so each panel is my idea of a month. Each vertical column is 1 week in that month. 4 weeks is a month, relatively speaking. So I decided that I would make this in the terms artistically, I'd make it a modern day tapestry. And therefore I would literally follow the thread of the story. So this is what I did. I chose this color palette. All the blue is politics, all the red is conflict, all the green is money, the pink is science, purple is people. So, now, considering this was a completely arbitrary decision on my part to start this on one single day of my life, and as it turned out, so what I would do is I would let the headlines tell me what was the main story in that month. The main story of this first month was the Syrian chemical weapons attack, which literally happened the second day. The image behind it is all of the dead children lying on the morgue floor. So as you can see how much red is here, we almost went to war again that week, that month. We almost ended up back in the Middle East in Syria, going to war. The next month was the Kenyan mall attack in Nairobi, Kenya, when the Al-Shabaab went in and started shooting up the mall. The third month was Rob Ford and all of his drug problems became international news. The fourth one is Bitcoin and how that is going to be a currency that's going to change the very economy of this world. The fifth one is Nelson Mandela, who passed away. The sixth one is Pope Francis. Now we have number 7 as the Ukraine conflict that started off as a political problem that became a conflict. Then we have the Malaysian air flight that went down somewhere in the South Ocean. The next one is the Boko Haram, who kidnapped all the girls, all the school kids got kidnapped. The next is Edward Snowden, who's, of course, was growing in the news, and we'll talk a little bit about him. The next one is the ISIS, and finally, Ebola, the Ebola virus. So, unbeknownst to me when I started this project, history wrote this project for me. I didn't finish this project and then cherry pick backwards. I literally went day to day and let history write a story to me. I was really quite surprised in simple 12 months that there are literally 11 stories. The only one that's not a story anymore is Rob Ford. Out of all those, that's 11 stories that still affect us to this day. Now this whole project started with my husband and his family in Iraq, and here we are at the end of it. ISIL is as a result of the wars that were fought in Iraq, or the gestation of ISIL. So, here, the second panel here, Boko Haram. When I did also a book with this, I wrote in that book already, several months back, that could have been a ball anywhere in Canada. It didn't have, you would not know by looking at that picture that that was in Kenya by any stretch of the imagination. Those were parents terrified, carrying their kids out in panic. And I wrote at that time, this could have been the West Edmonton Mall. And just last month, the headline was, Al-Shabaab was threatening the West Edmonton Mall and the Mall of America in Minnesota. So it wasn't just an over there in Kenya problem. We won't bother about Rob Ford. That's a bit of a tragedy. His coming up into the news. Then Bitcoin. Are you all familiar with Bitcoin? No? This is a digital currency that was started by a group of people to basically trade for services on the dark web, buy drugs, guns, assassinations. And this then became used more commonly, and now you can actually buy pizza with it. So this is going to change how we transact. It'll be digital. It won't be money anymore. It won't be credit cards. It will be a digital currency. So that will have a very huge effect. So this one reminds me of the fact that if I'd done this project the year before, every panel would have been green, because it was all about the stock market crashing. So funny, in 1 year, green became a very small part of this. Nelson Mandela, of course, was a huge figure in our history, made huge inroads in his country, and a little fact is the apartheid policy is what Canada has based its treatment on our Native First Nations people. That's how we modeled ourselves after was South Africa. Then we have Pope Francis. My husband is Catholic. He is Roman Catholic. I'm a free agent. But I have to say I admire this man for bringing the church back to its roots, back to people, calling the mafia out on its behaviors. And so he's been having quite a profound influence on the world in general. So now here we have the Ukraine crisis. Like I said, it started off as a civil conflict based on a vote to enter the EU. Quite innocuous, right? I mean, nobody would have thought that would end up having the country torn apart, Crimea taken in a day. And today, the headlines are Canada sending 200 troops to spend the next 2 years in Ukraine to teach the military. Which begs the question, how is it that Ukraine didn't have a military that was functioning up to this point? They were part of the old Soviet bloc. Military is their bread and butter, so how is it that they now need to be taught how to be military by Canada? Begs you question what that's about. Then the MH370. Here, a plane. In this day and age, we all have a cell phone. Our parents can track our every movement. And a plane goes missing and nobody knows where the hell it went down. Right? A simple little payment that they could have made monthly to track that plane they opted out on corrected on this. Boko Haram. The gentleman here in the middle is a picture of who they believe the leader of Boko Haram is. That's actually his body double. He died already 9 years ago. So they just keep putting out an image of somebody that they've made the leader, but he's actually not the leader. Today is the anniversary of the girls being taken out of Boko Haram. The story continuing on this was what Nigeria would do to save those girls. And we're gonna get them, we're gonna get them, we're gonna get them. And a year later, they're still enslaved to Boko Haram. Then Edward Snowden. Just these last couple of weeks ago, Canada voted on that bill C-51. And it has everything to do with Edward Snowden and his revelations that the government is tracking everything we do. And he brought it forward because he wanted all of us to know what that actually meant. John Oliver just did a great show the other week on him. And at the end of the day, people were more concerned about the government getting their dick pics than their metadata. We should be all worried about our metadata because the government, what they can do with that and what they can take from that is frightening. Absolutely frightening. I was at a show this past weekend in Coleman, and I got asked by a gentleman what the Green Party policies are on guns, on handguns specifically. And I said it's a party of nonviolence. And I wanted to ask him, well, what do you think about the Harvard government restricting your rights and privileges and taking all your data? What's more dangerous? Taking away your handguns or taking away your civil liberties, right? And then we have ISIL, ISIS. One of the very interesting things about this, and that's their flag, is it's ISIL, and it started off as ISIL, and it got morphed into ISIS. And ISIL stands for Iraq and Syria Islamic Levant. Now the L is the most important word in that designation because the Levant actually means a wide swath of land that goes from all the way over from Egypt through to Turkey, all the way through Syria, Iraq, into the peninsula. It's not just Iraq and Syria, but because the news doesn't want to explain to you what the word Levant means, they kind of truncate it down and say, it's just Iraq and Syria, don't worry your pretty little heads about it because it's not going to go anywhere. It will because it's the Levant. And that's their plan, is to take over the entire Levant. And then we have the Ebola virus. That virus actually started back here in January, and when that was brought forward to the world community, people said, well, who cares what's happening in Liberia and those countries off in West Africa? We don't really care about that. We had to care about that. We had to already be there the moment it came out, bring people in and control that virus. That will still peter on through to the rest of this year, and the next time it breaks out, there's still no further ahead. Anyway, so in doing this project, one of the things that I got asked by a lot of people is what can I, the individual, do about all these amazing things that happen in life? And I want to point out that there's 4 individuals in this panel who, besides who's not a model, but 3 other people who did profound and are doing profound things to make a difference in our world right now. So with you guys now coming up into your adulthood, this is where you get to start entering into the world and asking yourself, how do I as an individual enter into this world? So, a couple of things that came out very interesting in this thing that didn't come out as panels was CAR, which is a Central African Republic. And that problem pretty much dominated, it went throughout this entire year and it's still going on. And at that time, they were beheading children, just like ISIS was doing with reporters and people. They were eating people for revenge. Title read, Cannibalism Used as Revenge. I'm reading this, I'm like, this is 2014. This isn't some 200-year-ago headline that you're going, well, these are just crazy old headlines. In this day and age, we are reading headlines that people are using cannibalism as revenge. Another interesting thing that came up, one teeny little headline, was there was a lab in England who has managed to splice onto our very DNA X and Y. So ACHT now has X and Y. They've created a brand new life form on this planet. And the article reads, but we've contained it to the lab. They've made it able to self-replicate in the lab, but they've got conditions that it won't do it outside the lab. So in 10, 15 years, when you guys, some futuristic horror story, new mutant life form evolves on Earth, you can trace it back to that lab that started with splicing on 2 new chemicals onto our very DNA. Scary stuff. Another interesting story that went throughout this is Fukushima, the aftermath of the tsunami that happened 3 years ago. Now, at the time of that event, they had made it very clear that there was no meltdown in those reactor cores, and that Chernobyl was going to stay #1 worst nuclear disaster in the world, and Fukushima's got it all under control. Well, 3 weeks ago, the headline read, reactor #1 is empty. Sounds good, eh? Well, thank God they don't have to clean anything up. Reactor #1 is empty. But what that means is reactor #1 completely melted down. It melted down so badly, it went through the housing, it went through the concrete floor, it went through the sub-basement, and now it is under the plant. Now, Chernobyl did the same thing. It's called the elephant's foot. It leaked out from underneath the core, but thank God Chernobyl was built on granite, and it melted through 9 feet of solid granite. So 3 meters of solid granite, that radioactive core melted through. They were able to contain that in a cement sarcophagus. Great, wonderful. Fukushima is built on gravel with a aquifer running underneath of it out into the Pacific Ocean. They have no idea what to do with it. They will never know what to do with it. They don't know how far it's melted down into that. They have no way to contain it. Therefore, that radiation will continue to leak out and be part of the Pacific Ocean's water and food cycle for the next couple thousand years. So, worse than Chernobyl. So, anyways, so these are the things that I cross over. I cross over from money to science to people to politics to conflict that affect all of us. They ripple out, and they ripple out, and they ripple out. And so the things that rippled out for me that got me started on this project, these are the things that will ripple out in your life, and it might not be significant right now, but at some point in your life there'll be some crossovers that will make it very significant to you. And it all started someplace. One other very interesting topic, politically, because it's a political hearing. Ted Cruz. Cruz renounces his Canadian citizenship, August 22nd, 2013. Now, Ted Cruz, you guys know Ted Cruz? Any ideas? Ted Cruz is a Tea Party candidate in the States who has just thrown his hat in the ring for the presidential nomination. He is actually born in Calgary, and his mother's American, and his father's Cuban. So he's renouncing his Canadian citizenship because he was one of the group of Tea Party people who claimed that Barack Obama was not American. And according to the Constitution of America, if you're not a born American, you cannot run for president. You can be the governor, aka Arnold Schwarzenegger, is a naturalized citizen. He can become a governor, but he cannot become the president. Now, they claim that Barack Obama, being born of a Kenyan father to an American mother, possibly in Hawaii, was not qualified to be the president of the United States because he was not American. Ted Cruz is born in Calgary to an American mother. Exactly the same circumstances. Barack Obama's mother is from Kansas, his father's from Kenya. He was born in Hawaii, not in Canada, not in Kenya, not somewhere else. And even if he was, the very fact that his mother's an American citizen qualifies him immediately from birth to be an American. So, the guy who claimed that was not a no-go, quietly, 2 years prior to his announcement, quietly says, I'm not a Canadian anymore. But not only is he a Canadian, he's an American and he's a Cuban. Bravo, isn't that wonderful? Our world should reflect the diversity that we have in this world. January, lawyers in Canada say, funny, we haven't seen the paperwork come through yet. Finally, in May, the paperwork comes through. So again, it's just sort of, to me, another one of these examples of how they throw out a headline, we get all attended to it, and then it fades away, and then we don't follow. Well, did he really renounce his citizenship? Or did it take till May to do that? And so therefore, he knew he wanted to put his name in the hat for presidency, even though he claims it was just something, some soul searching he didn't want to do. And so these are the examples of the information we get in life and how it carries through in time. So, at the end of the day, what this project and my life experience inspired me to do was get involved in politics. I'm not here to discuss any party policy. I'm just saying this is what it inspired me to do. And I've chosen a party that represents my values. It doesn't have to represent anybody else's values, but it represents mine. And given that I have a husband who left a country that was a dictatorship, whose class trip when he was in grade probably 7, 8, was being taken down to the town square to be shown 3 people being hung for sedition. And so that's what he got to experience as an 11-year-old, was being shown by the government, this is what we do to people who talk against the government. We all hang them in the street for you. That's not ancient history, that's his life. I value our freedom in Canada and our ability to have a democratic system, but we do have to be engaged in that democratic system, because those countries were made up of people, good people, whose circumstances in politics went very much south. So, I will just put it in your heads. Think about where you're going to be in life. Think about what you value about this country, the circumstances you live in. These are all happening around us. They're affecting us. They're part of our lives. We can engage into them. We can ignore them. We can become a little bit a part of it. We might just volunteer a few hours here, there, somewhere else. Anyways, okay, so that's much. Any questions? Take a water about. Take